but we'll come to that in a second. Right. Okay, so the idea behind this Smart Site seminar essentially is to give you an idea for what's been happening this year, what's coming out in the next release, and also some ideas about the future. What you'll see though, if you've got your GoToMeeting sort of screen on the right hand side, if you do want to ask a question, there's a chat session down there and you can type in a question into the bottom bar. Steve will keep an eye on that for me, and he'll let me know if anyone wants to ask a question. Then we can sort of unmute your microphone and you can ask your question. There will be plenty of time to discuss some things, because it leads into a questionnaire which hopefully you've all got this morning, but I'll take you through the questionnaire as well and describe some of the items that we're thinking of developing, and obviously ask for your input. I am recording the session as well, so you can watch it again later on. Hopefully if people haven't turned up, they can still see later on if they've joined us late. So as I say, the point of today really is to give you a list of features that have been added in 2018, just so you can see the sort of scope and the range of development that's been done. What's new in the next release of Smart Site, which is due almost instantly really. We're leaving it till January now, but they are actually ready, both iOS and Android. So I'll give you a quick run through some of the features of the latest update, and then we'll move on to the questionnaire where you've got a chance to give us your feedback. So if we look at what's been added in 2018, as you can see, there's quite a lot of items here. It's not a totally exhaustive list, because there have been some things that have been added as a sort of bug fixes that we haven't really listed in here. But these are mainly sort of changes in the way the system works, how it looks. So if we have a look through here, we can see some of the main things that have been added. Obviously, the multiple service checklist feature was a major one, obviously, because that changed it from having just one checklist for a visit, and now you can have obviously several pumps, several motors, or several gearboxes, or whatever other checklist you want to use, all on the same visit. And obviously that's been enhanced further in recent times, in that it now will actually assign a checklist to an engineer, so that basically only that engineer can fill that checklist in, so we don't get any issues with this, with more than one engineer trying to fill in the same checklist. What we've also got, sorry, let me go back. What we've also got along here, some new items, is we've done quite a lot with photos. Some multi-select images are now available from the gallery. So if you take your photos outside of Smart Site, you can still use the gallery function to actually bring them into Smart Site. And obviously you can do things like photos pinch to zoom. We've also done some work very recently in basically as you'll see, and allowing you to label photos and things like that. And we've also changed the way photos are actually synced to make it more efficient. If you're using labour scheduling, you will now see the start and end times on the job list. When you look at your job list on the device, it will show you when you're expected to be there and finish. And we've also now got Site Work and Service Centre in that list, so you can see whether you're on site or off site. We've also done things like updated various sections of the app to implement sentence case, so that when your engineers are typing in comments, it'll hopefully start the sentence with a capital letter. And if you use a full stop again, it will make sure it enforces a capital letter to start the next sentence. And that's in quite a few sections, system like job notes, your activity section, safety and service checklists. Someone's not muted. I don't know if you can see that, Stephen.
No, I can't mute it.
No, Mike's not muted. Mike, sorry, can you mute your speaker for the your microphone for the moment? Thanks. If we go forward, then some of the features in this next release that are due out now. What we've done is we've opened up the EMEA job list, which is normally just status P. We've actually included now, optionally, if you want it, you have to let us know, to include to be quoted and evaluation jobs as well. If the engineer tries to complete those in the front end, it won't actually complete in EMEA, obviously, because they're not statuses that can move to finished goods. So basically, although those jobs will list, the engineer won't be able to complete them as finished. We've allowed you now to add photo labels, and we've also, as I said, just previously, we've changed the sync method for photos. Quite a big change this. In previous versions, it was syncing all photos at once, sending up big lists of photos and bringing down big lists of photos. And for some Android items in particular, they were struggling with memory requirements if people are taking a lot of photos. So what happens now actually is, even though it does do a mass sync, it does each photo individually. So it sends and receives one at a time, which actually made it more efficient as well. It will only download photos back from EMEA that aren't already on the device, whereas before it was flushing all the photos through. So you should see quite an improvement in that side of things. One of the other new changes is we now give you the option whether you want to sync when you log into the system. So it was quite annoying for some users that if they'd synced and then gone to site, when they got to site, if they had a signal, the system would still automatically try and sync as they logged in, which would obviously just be overwriting all the information they already had, and they have to wait for it to sync again. So now you do get the option as to whether you want to sync when you log in, so you don't have to sync if you don't want to. That's providing, of course, you've already got data on your phone. If there's no data there at all, it will have to sync, or else it won't be able to find you any jobs. We've also added another part section, so now not only can the engineer record his parts that he wants to use, but if anyone's already recorded part usage on a job in EMEA, he will also see all the other parts that have been recorded. Again, the sentence case thing's been done. There was a bug, I think mainly in iOS, about job notes wouldn't show more than 4 lines in a display, but that's all changed now as well. And there's also a new functionality change that if no labour has been recorded against a job, it won't allow the customer to sign the job off. So that means the engineer will have to record some labour before the customer can sign the job off, obviously, because he will have done some labour if he's on site. And there's a change to Android as well, which is at the moment, but in the labour section in iOS, it enforces you to choose an activity. But actually in Android, it would allow you to go through without actually choosing the activity. So we've just tried to make it consistent, essentially. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to actually show my device, and typically Reflector is playing up, so let me just restart that. Just bear with me a second while this restarts. Okay, here we go. Okay, so you should all be able to see my phone on the screen now. Is that okay, guys? Yeah.
No, it's not quite clear. It's a bit blurry, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure how to change that. It looks perfect on my screen.
Go into the product and
Let's have a look what SmartSight looks like then. Let's have a look at that.
that's it. Yeah, it's getting clear now.
Okay, so when we log in to the latest version, as I mentioned, one of the things you'll get now is you'll get that message. Would you like to perform a full sync, yes or no? Obviously, if you say no, it'll just go in and keep the data that's already on the device. So it saves a bit of time. From the materials point of view, as you can see now, you have 2 tabs. You have the My Parts and you have the Other Parts. So if I click on Other Parts, you can now see any other parts that have been recorded by any other user within EMEA or by using SmartSight. So only their own parts can be changed. So you can see you've got a delete option here, and you can obviously add new parts up here yourself into SmartSight. But from another parts point of view, you do get to see all the other parts that have been used in EMEA. Okay, moving on, we've got a change in the picture side of things. Sorry, in the pictures. So now if you have, you'll have a label here at the bottom of the photo. If you click the photo, you can either delete the image, view the image, or change the label. And so you can label it to whatever you want, and it will then save, and that will update the label in EMEA as well from the photos point of view. And if you obtain customer signature, as I mentioned before, you'll see on this job we have actually no labour, no travel, no travel time. If I do sign off job, it gives you the warning that no labour has been found and you have to add some before completing the job. So they're the main features that have changed in this version. From a sync point of view, when you actually sync all, I say the photo sync has changed quite significantly. What you've seen there is that no photos are sent up or down because it doesn't have to refresh them anymore now. It only literally does one at a time and does those that have actually changed or have been added since, whereas before it used to sync most photos on most occasions. So that should be a lot more streamlined. So was there any questions at this point? Okay, we just popped a message in there, fine. All right, so let's go on with the presentation. So is that right? So in terms of the questionnaire, what we've done now is, obviously we've had our EMEA development focus group, and we've also been talking to SmartSite users as they've had implementations and have been using the system for a while. And we've come up with a list of future development items that people are interested in, and some of them are quite well defined, and we can basically go ahead and develop them, providing there's enough level of interest, and other areas need some more sort of contribution from the user base. Number one, to see how interested people are in having that change, but two, to actually come up with a spec of some of the items which are quite complex. So the way we're going to make this work is, you've got a questionnaire there. If you can fill it in as soon as you can after this seminar finishes, send it back to us. We'll be discussing the mods that people are interested in directly with them. So where we need more information, we'll discuss those modifications directly with that group. So some of the things that we've sort of defined that are quite well defined and are sort of can be ready to go, or things that might need more input from you. One of the things that's been mentioned previously is that perhaps it'd be useful to have another application or an extension to SmartSite that would allow you to see where all your engineers are at any time, basically by using location services. So as an idea, it means you'll be able to see where your engineers are. So if you get another job come in and you need to know who's near what that area, then obviously you can look at the app and see where your engineers are. I say it would probably be an extension to SmartSite as opposed to part of SmartSite. It may be a web view you can use to do it, but would basically enable the app to capture the location information and then display it on a map for you. So if you're interested in that, obviously please put your company name in, and then you put very interested, put an X in this box. If you're not that bothered about it, but it's quite interesting, put an X in there. And if you're not interested at all, then please put an X in there. If you have any preferences how you'd like that to operate or be able to view it, then please type in some comments, and I'll say we'll come back to you and move that forward. A big area that's been mentioned by many users is dynamic risk assessments. And people have different ideas behind what a dynamic risk assessment is. As you know, at the moment, an engineer can fill in a safety checklist, which is a set of questions in an order with yes/no responses, and they can fill in service checklists. But from a sort of RAM point of view and a dynamic risk assessment, what we're thinking here is a way for an engineer to build their own RAM as they go in SmartSite. So give them the tools to be able to identify, is this a working at height risk or whatever other kind of risk, and then work out a severity for that so they can create their own plan and course of action. At the moment, obviously, a lot of people send RAMs by putting them as Word documents and sending them along with the actual job to the engineer. But if they do need to be created on site as a dynamic risk assessment, then obviously this is an area that we can look to develop and pop into SmartSite for you. So again, if you're very interested in that, put an X in the top box. If you're not interested, put an X in the bottom box. If you have more specifics on how you'd like that to work or how you see an engineer being able to use it, then please type it in the comments box. I know one or two of you have commented on that already, but once we've got comments of all those that are I think it's an important addition, we then will come and take that spec to the next level and then work out how much work it actually is. A user to be able to add new service checklists. So the idea behind this is that an engineer might go to site and on his phone he's got a couple of service checklists already, but when he gets there he finds there's a third item that also needs to be put through a checklist and recorded. What we'd look to do is for the engineer to be able to add another checklist to that job himself dynamically while he's on site. He'll be able to choose from the existing service checklist that exists in EMEA. So as you know, in EMEA at the moment, you create generic service checklists, say maybe one for a pump, one for a motor, one for a gearbox, etc. And then you allocate multiple instances of those to a job. So essentially the engineer will be able to go, I want to create a new checklist, it's for a pump, and then basically a new checklist will be issued on the job, and then he'll be able to save it in EMEA as well. So the only thing with that, you probably would need to still have internet connectivity, because it would need to talk to EMEA to get the next ID for that checklist. But that's probably going into a little bit too much detail at this point. Again, if you think that would be very important, please let us know, or if you're not interested, let us know. Another area that's been mentioned of interest is to use the required spares functionality from EMEA within SmartSite. So as you know, in EMEA, if you go to the spares tab, you can add required materials. What we could do is show those in SmartSite. So at the moment, you've got my materials, other materials, and maybe you could have required materials, and give the engineer a way of sort of clicking each required material that is used, and for the sort of part usage to be recorded then. So that could either be allocated or required items. It's quite a big area actually. Required spares has got a lot of functionality associated with it, so it's not a small modification. But if you'd like to be able to send an engineer a list of required spares, preferably I think you would allocate them, and you would allocate them to the job, so they would go to the engineer and he could use them when he gets to site. So let us know again if you think that's a very important change, or if you're interested in any way. Another option that's been mentioned is that sometimes when an engineer is on site, obviously, and he puts things down as this job needs additional work, it might be handy to be able to know if we're going to replace materials and do labour on this job in terms of the additional work, what kind of price that might be, a kind of a quote on the spot for the client as to how much work it would be to actually do the additional work, because then instead you might actually want to just sell him a new item as opposed to repairing it. So this is going to be a kind of dynamic pricing tool, which will let the engineer quickly say, we're going to do this much labour, we're going to use these parts, and it will come to X, and then he can talk to the client there and then and say whether that's worth doing, or he'll be able to check the price of a new part and see how that compares. So that's going to change SmartSite in quite a few ways. So at the moment, we don't bring across some of that pricing information automatically. We only bring across as well parts that are actually in the engineer's van. So we'd have to open up the parts list so he can choose from any parts, not just the one that's in his van. So there's quite a bit of work involved there. But again, if you'd like your engineers to be able to tell the client a likely cost for future work, then that might be an option that interests you. Another thing that people have mentioned is that to notify the client once a job has been completed on site. So your engineer goes to site on SmartSite, does all the work, gets a sign off. They'd like, as soon as it's synced to EMEA, for EMEA to generate an email saying to the client, this job has now been completed, with some generic job information perhaps in the message. And then so basically he then knows, the person that ordered it, that the work is complete. Obviously, that's slightly different from sending service checklists and things like that and signatures, but there's another option for that a little bit further down. A big change that we're looking at, and I know a couple of people are very interested in, like us to get moving on, is to introduce multiple assets per job into EMEA. And obviously that will also have an effect to SmartSite. So if you're allowed, instead of just setting service checklists on a job, you can actually list several assets, and with each asset will have its own service checklist predefined. So if it's a pump, it will have a pump service checklist already defined with the assets. So you'll drag assets onto jobs, multiple assets, and then that will automatically generate the right amount of service checklists. And when that service checklist is filled in, not only will it be stored against a job, but it will also be stored against the asset for future reference. Also, if we're linking to assets, the engineer might be able to go, okay, show me the previous history of repairs on this asset, and basically give them a kind of a small asset view, so they can scroll through the previous jobs and see what other work has been done in previous times. So that could have quite a big scope of work. Again, if you think that's something that's going to be really useful to you and your organisation, please let us know how important that is. Okay, these items are sort of more defined in this section, might not need so much discussion. One of them that a few people have mentioned is an auto sync option. So at the moment, obviously, on SmartSite, the syncing takes place as a manual process. The engineer will hit sync data or sync all to sync the data across. What we're suggesting here is that if SmartSite's running and you have a good signal, so either Wi-Fi or 4G, for example, and the phone hasn't synced in a while, we'll automatically do a background sync. Okay, so if you think that's important, then let us know. If you're not interested, again, let us know on that. Another option that people have mentioned is that at the moment, engineers fill in a safety checklist. There's only one per job at the moment, but the engineer doesn't sign off the safety checklist to say it's been filled in and completed. It doesn't get his signature. So some people said it'd be useful to have an engineer signature so that they can see who's filled in the checklist, as well as when it was filled in, the date and time, etc. So again, if you think that's useful, let us know. Further on from that is, instead of having one safety checklist per job, we'll be able to save one per engineer. So if you've sent several engineers, you could get them all to fill in their own safety checklists if necessary, or if they visit on separate days, you might want them to fill in a checklist every day they go. So that's an option that could be looked at. Again, we need to know how important that is to you and your engineers on a day-to-day basis. The damage report tab in EMEA isn't currently linked to SmartSite at all, although I know some people are using the damage report tab in EMEA to list out scope of work. Therefore, it might be interesting to be able to see that on SmartSite. So it's very similar to the activity tab. It's a free text tab essentially. If you'd like to also be able to, the engineer to write in the damage report tab or see the damage report tab and for it to sync back to EMEA, then let us know, and obviously we can look to put that in process as well. As you probably remember from SmartSite, the first option in SmartSite is job information. So that lists things like the manufacturer, the serial number, the frame number, and things like that. So what some people have said, it'd be useful if the engineer could update that information if it's changed or if it's incorrect, so they can go through and obviously update the various fields and it will sync back into EMEA. So again, if that's important to you, let us know. A very big modification that we're looking at, and I know some people are interested in, we're actually getting this priced up at the moment, is to be able to bill the client directly from SmartSite. So effectively, particularly for those customers like cash customers, you go out, you do the work, you use the parts, and then from that, we want SmartSite to be able to say the bill is X now. So if you haven't put a price on the job and it's been dynamically priced, you'll be able to basically come up with a price from the work that's been carried out and the parts that have been used. So that means sending across more information to SmartSite again about the parts and prices, and it also means we'd have to allow you to define the labour rates that you want to associate with site work as well. But essentially that would then allow you to bill a customer on the fly and basically be able to, if you've got credit card payment facilities, actually take payment while you're there. So again, if you think that's going to be important to your organisation, please let us know. Some people have also suggested that as well as the job information tab, there's obviously in EMEA, there's the tech tab and there's the Tech 2 tab. So the Tech tab has got volts and amps and phase and things like that on it. And Tech 2 has obviously got a separate template for pumps, AC motors, DC motors, gearboxes, etc. If you want the engineer to collect that data while they're on site and for it to update back into EMEA, then let us know if that's important to you, and that's something that we can also add as a new option. Again, that would probably have connotations for multiple assets. We'd have to have multiple copies of some of that information, but let us know again if that is of interest to you. And then customer signature per service checklist. As you know, at the moment, a customer has a sign-off page and he can review all the checklists that have been completed up to that point, view all the pass and fails and any comments, etc. And he signs off at the end of the job to say that that job is complete and he's seen the engineer, etc. What might be appropriate though is to have a signature per checklist, so you get the customer to sign each checklist individually, and perhaps you could say that's applicable by customer or applicable on a job level basis. So you could say on a particular job, this only needs one signature, or this needs several signatures, one for each checklist. Could be useful as well if you're going back and visiting several different days, and you can then basically capture sign off for the work done each day in terms of the checklist that's been filled in. We would then obviously have to capture several signatures, and we'd have to then stitch it together so that when you send out a checklist report back to the customer by email, it would attach the appropriate signature to the appropriate checklist. But it's all perfectly possible. If you think it's important enough for SmartSite to do, then again, please let us know. Another option similar to what we've seen before is an instant email of service checklists. So at the moment, you will get your engineers completing jobs. You can then look in EMEA for completed jobs, either via the site checklist inquiry or the completed jobs inquiry, see which jobs have been completed, and then you know then to go to those jobs and email off copies of the service checklists with the with your time and materials also showing, and whatever else you want to show them, and obviously a signature. What we could do instead is that as soon as the engineer completes the job, it could trigger that email to be sent directly to the client, so including the service checklists. It might be slightly dangerous though, because if an engineer's got typos in it or hasn't filled it in quite right for some reason, you might want to instead send that on to an internal admin in your own organisation as a trigger for them to pass that on to the client, or for them to review it before it goes to the client. But again, it's something that people have suggested might be good to automate the process. So as soon as the job's completed, it's synced, the customer then gets a copy of the various service checklists signed straight to their email account. As part of the sign-off process at the moment, the customer will see time and expenses that have been recorded. Might not see labour rates currently, but he'll see total work time, travel time, and also any expenses that have been recorded. We could optionally allow you to remove that from the sign-off page if you don't want the customer to see those figures. So again, let us know if that's something you'd be interested in. So that's everything at the moment that we've collated from you as ideas. They're all on this Word document. I'm waiting for your comment. If you can complete this checklist and let us know which items interest you, then we can obviously come down, focus and discuss those items with you individually, and obviously define a better specification that we can then look to get into a work in progress from our point of view. Okay, so we've come to kind of the end of what I wanted to discuss. Are there any questions at this point? What I can do actually is hopefully I can unmute all your microphones, so you're all available to talk at this point. Were there any specific questions? Anyone put anything in the chat? No. Okay, I'll take it. I've stunned you all into silence there. Obviously, oh, hello. How's that? Is that Emily? Sorry, I don't know. Is that a question for us, or is that just background noise? Okay, background noise. Okay, thanks very much for coming along, guys. We will be following up with you sort of one-on-one, but if you can complete the questionnaire as soon as possible, then hopefully we can get on and move some of these things forward. We have got quite a big list of development we want to do. We just need to rank them now in the order of importance that you want as clients, you want to see in your products. So as soon as you can give us the information, the sooner we can move forward. And we've come to a sort of agreement with our app development partners that we have already earmarked a lot of development for next year on a retainer basis, so we can hopefully get through this list in good time for everyone to get the options they want as quickly as possible. Okay, thanks very much for attending, everyone, and hope to catch up with you soon. Thanks.